That night, dinner at home had an atmosphere so thick I could hear my own heart pounding. My husband Daniel had just returned from a month-long business trip to Chicago. He hadn't come back alone. A woman named Kira accompanied him, whom he vaguely introduced as a close colleague. I tried to force a smile, but a bad feeling had already settled deep inside me. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, seated at the head of the table, kept shooting glances at me that were as sharp as a knife. She cleared her throat, and the dry sound echoed in the silence. Look at Kira. She's so vibrant, and she has such a good presence. You can tell she's a girl who clearly takes care of herself. Then she gave me a look full of intention, not like others who, after 3 years of marriage, are still as thin as a rail, with a stomach still flat as a board. I lowered my head, feeling the silverware weigh a ton in my hands. My sister-in-law, Vanessa, seated next to me, let out a chuckle, adding more fuel to the fire. Mom, don't say that. You'll make my sister-in-law sad. Nowadays, many women choose not to have children to maintain their figure, you know. Her words sounded like a defense, but the irony was unmistakable. Daniel remained silent. He took a lamb chop and placed it on Kira's plate. That gesture of tenderness was like a stab to my heart. Seeing my silence, my mother-in-law became emboldened. Keeping to her figure for what? A woman who can't bear children, no matter how pretty, is nothing more than a pretty vase. This family needs a male heir, not a decorative object. Throughout the dinner, only the voices of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were heard. I was like a ghost. Kira, sitting there, feigned shyness, but a look of victory gleamed in the depths of her eyes. Finally, Daniel spoke. He put down his silverware with a dry clang. He looked at me with an unfamiliar coldness. Mom is right. I'm fed up. I looked up, my heart skipped a beat. Daniel, what are you saying? I'm saying I'm fed up with this situation. I come home and the atmosphere is unbreathable. My wife doesn't understand me. In these 3 years, what have you done for this family besides being a kept woman? Every word he uttered was devoid of any affection. Kira, next to him, pretended to pull on his sleeve. Daniel, stop, please. Talk things through calmly. That gesture was the last straw. Daniel pulled Kira's hand away, stood up abruptly, and pointed directly at me. Calmly? There's no need anymore. I've tolerated you enough. He pulled a folder and a check from his briefcase and threw them onto the table in front of me. The force was so great that soup splashed out of the bowl. Divorce papers. Here is $1 million. Consider it compensation for your youth. Sign it and get out of my house. My ears were ringing. Everything around me blurred through tears. $1 million for my youth. 3 years as a wife and daughter-in-law, dedicating myself to this family. That's all it was worth. Daniel, why? Why are you treating me this way? Why, Mag? He let out a cruel laugh. You still don't know? Look at yourself. A woman who can't have children and doesn't know how to keep her husband has no right to blame anyone. As he finished, he raised his hand. A sharp sound echoed, and my face burned, turned to one side. That slap didn't just hurt my cheek. It awakened my love and my stupidity, shattering 3 years of my youth into 1,000 pieces. Daniel's slap sent me falling to the floor, my cheek stinging and numb. The $1 million check lay on the table next to the divorce papers he had already signed. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked at me with glee, expecting me to cry, beg, and make a scene like any other defeated woman. Daniel stood with his arms crossed, a look of contempt on his face. But I didn't cry. The tears flowed inward, turning into a terrifying coldness. I steadied myself on my hands and slowly got up. Without looking at anyone, I walked to the table, picked up the divorce papers, and quickly reviewed the petty clauses. Then I picked up the check. Everyone thought I would save it as the last thing I could salvage, but no, before the astonished gaze of the entire family, I tore the check in half, then into quarters, until it was confetti. I tossed the pieces into the air, and they drifted to the floor like summer snow, burying my cheap marriage. My youth cannot be bought with money. I looked up and straight into Daniel's eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't look at him through the eyes of a wife, but those of a stranger. Thank you for setting me free. My voice didn't tremble. On the contrary, it was strangely serene. It wasn't a reproach, but sincere gratitude. Thank you for helping me end these 3 years of hell. My reaction was completely unexpected for them. Daniel froze. The arrogance on his face transformed into confusion and then rage. What? What did you say? Are you crazy? She tore up the money, my mother-in-law stammered. She is crazy. If you didn't want it, why tear it up? I didn't bother to respond. I turned and walked toward our bedroom, or rather, the one that used to be ours. I opened the closet and surveyed the row of dresses and bags he had bought me. I didn't touch anything. I only pulled out my small suitcase, packed some clothes I had bought myself, my personal items, and the only wedding photo I kept, the one where my smile was still pure. I dragged the suitcase into the living room. The family was still petrified, looking at me like I was an oddity. I opened my purse, took out the wedding photo, and gently placed it on the table. I'm returning this. From now on, our memories never existed. Having said that, I dragged the suitcase toward the door without looking back. I heard Daniel scream behind me, "Stop, you ungrateful woman! Do you think you can survive if you leave here?" I ignored him. As I walked out the door, I vaguely heard my mother-in-law shout, "Let her go, son! Let her go and leave us in peace. Let's see how many days she survives without this family." The door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the chaos inside. The New York night was humid, but I felt a relief I had never experienced before. The taxi pulled into the darkness, leaving behind the building where I had spent 3 years of my youth building an illusion. The streetlight slid across the window, dappling my expressionless face. I hadn't cried in front of them. I had shown myself to be strong and resilient. But now, alone in this confined space, that defensive wall completely collapsed. The tears began to fall, not in sobs, but in a silent, hot, and bitter torrent. The taxi driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, sighed, and turned down the radio. Perhaps he had transported too many broken women like me on nights like this. I didn't know where to go. That apartment was no longer my home. New York City was immense, and yet I felt completely alone. With trembling hands, I took the phone out of my purse. I had hundreds of contacts, but the only person I could call right then was my father. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from breaking, and dialed. The phone rang only once before it was answered. His deep, familiar voice sounded full of concern. "Ariana, what's wrong? Why are you calling me at this hour?" Hearing my father's voice, all my composure crumbled. I burst into tears, a choked cry that didn't form words, just sounds of pain. "Dad! Dad!" I could only repeat his name like a lost child. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. I knew he was suppressing his anger. Then he spoke in a voice that, though warm, had become firm. "Where are you? Give the address to the taxi driver and have him bring you home right now." "Home? What home?" I asked, confused. "I don't have a home anymore. To our house, to your father's house. My daughter, where are you going to go if you don't have a home to return to?" His words were like a stream of warm water on my frozen heart. Sobbing, I gave the driver the address. The car changed course. My father still hadn't hung up. "Don't worry, darling. Dad is here. Everything will be okay. You lost, didn't you?" I nodded through my tears, even though I knew he couldn't see me. "Yes, Dad, I lost. I was foolish." "It doesn't matter," he said with a decisive voice. "If you lose this game, we'll play another. The Sterling Group will always wait for you. Come home, sweetie. It's time to end this game." A game? What was he talking about? My mind was confused, but I didn't ask more. I only knew that an embrace awaited me, a safe haven where no one could hurt me again. The taxi stopped in front of an enormous villa in the Upper East Side. The security guard recognized me and hastily opened the gate. The lights in the courtyard illuminated a meticulously cared-for garden. This was my real home, the place where I grew up, but from which I had exiled myself for 3 years in a cramped apartment, trying to play the role of an obedient daughter-in-law in a mediocre family. My father was waiting for me at the door. He didn't say much. He simply took the suitcase from my hand and hugged me. "The important thing is that you're back. We'll talk tomorrow. Go up and rest, daughter." My father's hug was so firm, it drained away all my exhaustion and pain. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply, without nightmares. The next morning, when I woke up, the sun flooded the room. I walked down the stairs. My father was in the living room, reading the newspaper with a cup of hot tea next to him. When he saw me, he put down the paper. "Sit down, Ariana. There's something I want to explain to you." I sat across from him, feeling a bit nervous. I knew the game he mentioned last night was about to be revealed. My father sighed, his voice tinged with sadness. "Ariana, do you hold a grudge against me for letting you suffer these past 3 years?" I shook my head. "No, Dad, it was my decision." My father looked at me with compassion. Do you know why? 3 years ago, Daniel's small construction firm, which was on the verge of bankruptcy, suddenly bounced back. I was puzzled. I didn't know anything about that. Daniel had always said it was thanks to his talent and a stroke of luck. My father placed a folder on the table. It was thanks to Sterling. 3 years ago, I secretly invested $30 million in his company, saving it from certain ruin. My heart pounded fiercely. 30 million, a figure I could barely imagine. Why? Why did you do that, Dad? My father took a sip of tea. His voice became grave. For you, because at that moment you loved him blindly and insisted on marrying him. I knew Daniel was ambitious but had a poor character, and his family was materialistic. But for your sake, I decided to give him a chance, a test. A test. Yes, I saved his company with the sole condition that he marry you. I wanted to see how he would treat you for 3 years, once he had success and money in his hands. How he would treat the wife who was with him during the difficult times. I hoped he would change, that he would learn to value you, but I was wrong, and you have been the one who suffered the most. The truth left me speechless. It turned out that my marriage, the love I'd given myself to completely, was nothing more than a gamble, a test in which I was the loser from the start. Daniel's career, his arrogance, everything had been built on my father's money and his love for me. And yet he and his family dared to treat me like a kept woman, a thorn in their side. Anger grew within me, but strangely, I no longer felt pain. I just felt ridiculous. Ridiculous for my own foolishness and for their deceit. After learning the whole truth, I spent an entire day sorting out my thoughts. Once the shock was over, what remained was a cold determination. They had turned my love into a joke, my family's kindness into a tool for their own gain. Well, I would show them how formidable I could be when love disappeared. On Monday morning, I was no longer the Ariana of yesterday. I discarded all the simple, modest dresses and replaced them with a perfectly tailored navy blue power suit that accentuated a figure I had long neglected. I applied makeup carefully, highlighting sharp eyes and wine-red lips. I pulled my long hair back into a sleek bun, revealing a slender neck and an intelligent forehead. Looking in the mirror, I saw a completely different person, a strange woman yet familiar. The woman I had lost over the last 3 years. My father was waiting for me downstairs. Seeing my new appearance, he nodded with satisfaction. Come on, honey, everyone's waiting for you. A luxury car took us to Sterling Tower, one of the city's tallest skyscrapers. It was the headquarters of our family group, a place Daniel and his family couldn't even dream of entering. We went straight to the top floor where the board of directors meeting room was located. When my father and I entered, all the members of the management team were already present. They were business veterans, names capable of making the market tremble. Seeing me, some showed surprise, others looked at me with curiosity. My father went straight to the main seat. He clapped twice, and the room fell silent. Good morning, everyone. I have called this meeting to announce an important decision. He paused and then looked at me. As of today, my daughter, Ariana Mitchell, will officially assume the position of Executive Vice President of the group, in charge of real estate project development. A murmur ran through the room. All eyes turned toward me, full of curiosity, doubt, and even disdain. They thought I was just a princess whose father had placed her in an ornamental position. My father raised his hand to silence them. I know what you are thinking, but I trust that my daughter's capability will be the clearest answer. He turned to me with an encouraging look. Ariana, do you have anything to say to the gentleman here? I took a step forward next to my father. I bowed my head respectfully and then looked directly at each of them. My voice was clear and firm. Gentlemen, I know I am young and lack experience, but I will not use words to prove my worth. I will use action. I look forward to your help and guidance. My words were not arrogant, but they showed no weakness. They contained a confidence and determination that could not be underestimated. Immediately after taking office, I was assigned to lead the Midtown Redevelopment Project, a mega project with a total investment of billions of dollars. It was not only Sterling's flagship project for the year, but also a true test of my ability. I knew that if I did well, I would silence all criticism. If I failed, I would always be the princess in her father's shadow. In the first project development meeting, I immediately felt the difficulty. As I presented the strategy, an older director named Salgado, responsible for the construction area, interrupted me. Madam Vice President, the plan you present sounds very good on paper, but I'm afraid it is a little detached from reality. We've been in construction for many years and know how complicated the process of land acquisition and execution is in that area. Things are not as simple as in the documents. His words seemed like a suggestion, but his tone was condescending and dismissive. Several other directors nodded. They clearly wanted to test me, to show me who had the experience there. The whole room watched, waiting to see how the young, inexperienced vice president would react. I showed neither anger nor nervousness. I stopped my presentation and smiled at Mr. Salgado. Thank you for your comment, Mr. Salgado. You are absolutely right. Reality is always more complex than theory. I completely agree. Seeing this, Mr. Salgado's expression became somewhat satisfied, but I continued. Precisely for this reason, I didn't spend the last 2 days of the weekend in the office reading documents. I was personally on the project site, meeting with each of the families affected by the acquisitions. I also had an informal meeting with the city planning department. I pressed the remote control, and a series of photos I had taken with my phone appeared on the large screen. Images of me speaking with residents, detailed diagrams of outstanding issues. This is the list of the last 15 families and their specific problems. Most can be resolved with the new relocation assistance policy the City Council approved last week. And this is a proposal to modify the design of Tower 2 to avoid a geologically unstable soil zone that has been giving your team headaches. I consulted this proposal with Professor Jimenez from the Polytechnic Institute. I spoke fluently with precise data. The room went from surprise to astonishment. Mr. Salgado turned pale, speechless. He couldn't believe that the vice president he had underestimated knew the problem better than he did, and had even found solutions on her own. I concluded my presentation. Of course, these are only the first steps. I need the experience and collaboration of all of you to make this project a reality. I hope we can work together. I bowed my head. This time, no one whispered. While I was starting a new life in another part of the city, Daniel was also getting used to the life he had longed for, but it seemed reality was not what he had imagined. The apartment I once decorated so meticulously was now cluttered and cold. Fast food boxes were piled on the table. Clothes were strewn across the sofa. Kira, after officially moving in, quickly showed her role as the new owner. She no longer maintained her sweet, obedient appearance. Instead, her demands became increasingly excessive. Danny, I saw the new Hermes bag online, Kira said, showing Daniel her phone as soon as he got home from work. On the screen was an elaborate designer evening gown with an equally elaborate price tag. It's gorgeous, right? If I wear it to the party, everyone will be stunned. You have to show them how incredible your fiancé is. Daniel looked at the price on the screen. Nearly $20,000 for a single night dress. He couldn't help but frown. Lately, the company was experiencing difficulties, and coupled with Kira's luxurious spending, his finances were no longer so comfortable. That's too expensive, honey. Why don't we choose something simpler? Hearing that, Kira frowned, and her eyes filled with tears. I knew it. You don't love me anymore, do you? You're nickel and diming me. You're afraid to spend, afraid people will know you have a mistress. That's why you don't want to invest in me, isn't it? She began her usual whine, a mix of pouting and reproaches. It's the first time I'm introducing myself to everyone as your woman. Do you want people to laugh at me for being dressed like a peasant? Exhausted by her complaints, Daniel finally gave in. Okay, if you like it and we'll buy it, but don't cry anymore. Kira stopped crying instantly, her face lit up. She hugged Daniel tightly. I knew it, my husband is the best. Daniel only sighed, feeling a deep annoyance. He didn't know that his decision to appease Kira this time would bring both of them unforgettable humiliation. The world of the truly wealthy was not what Kira imagined. There, people didn't wear expensive branded outfits to show off. Their elegance came from their demeanor, discreet jewelry, and high-level relationships. Kira's designer dress in the middle of a sea of bespoke haute couture looked vulgar and ostentatious. She felt out of place, and her smile became forced. At that moment, a silence spread through the entrance. Everyone looked there. I appeared. I wasn't wearing a flashy dress, but a simple pearl-colored silk gown from an up-and-coming American designer. I wasn't wearing expensive jewelry, just small pearl earrings. But the confidence and aura that emanated from me, forged in the business world and cultivated by a solid education, drew all eyes. Daniel and Kira saw me and froze. Daniel was surprised. In Kira's eyes, envy and jealousy were evident. She grabbed Daniel's arm and hissed, "What is she doing here? Who invited her?" Daniel didn't know either. He only felt that his ex-wife, whom he had once scorned, seemed strange and dazzling today. The party moved on to the charity auction. Everything from rare vintages and luxury trips to works of art was offered. When it was my turn, I donated a small oil painting of a lily pond at dawn. The painting had no artist's signature and seemed quite modest. Kira, from below, frowned and told Daniel, "Look at that, how tacky. She comes to a charity auction and brings an anonymous painting. I bet no one wants it." The starting price was $3,000, a modest figure. After a few bids, the price stopped at $10,000. The auctioneer was about to lower the hammer when a deep, calm voice resonated from the VIP area. 20,000. Everyone turned to look at the man who had bid. It was Ethan. He sat there with a serene expression. Another interested guest raised the bid to $40,000. Ethan, without hesitation, said, 100,000. The room began to murmur. An anonymous painting for $100,000. People thought Ethan was just joking, but the bidding continued. $150,000, $100,000, $1 million. Every time Ethan bid, he raised the figure vertiginously, giving his rivals no chance, and Daniel and Kira, seated below, turned pale. They couldn't understand why Ethan was willing to spend so much money on my painting. Finally, when a guest timidly bid $100,000, Ethan calmly raised his paddle. $5 million. The entire room held its breath. That figure was crazy. The auctioneer, trembling, counted. 5 million going once, 5 million going twice, 5 million going 3 times. Sold. Congratulations to the new owner. During the rest of the party, I became the center of attention. People kept whispering about the incredible auction and the relationship between Ethan and me. Daniel and Kira were petrified in a corner. Kira's face was pale, Daniel's filled with anger, jealousy, and confusion. He couldn't understand how his ex-wife, whom he had just abandoned, could know someone of Ethan's caliber. As the party was ending, I was alone on the balcony getting some air. Ethan approached. He wasn't carrying the painting. He handed me a small card. "This is the certificate of ownership. The painting will be sent to your address tomorrow." I was confused. "Ethan, why did you do this? The painting isn't worth that much." Ethan smiled. His smile under the moonlight seemed very gentle. "For others, perhaps not, but for you, it is." "What do you mean?" I was even more confused. Ethan looked into the distance. His voice became deeper. "My father, Julian Thorne, and your father, Leonard Mitchell, were great friends since they studied abroad together." "Didn't you know?" I froze. My father had never told me about this. "That painting," Ethan continued, "is by the late painter Anderson, a friend of both of theirs. It's not an anonymous painting. Your father bought it a long time ago with the intention of giving it to you for your wedding. But for some reason he never did. He recently spoke with my father, lamenting it. I happened to learn that it was being auctioned here." He turned to look at me, his gaze sincere. "I didn't buy it for myself. I just helped it return to its rightful owner. Consider it a late wedding gift from your father." All the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place in my head. His words in the library, his gesture of yielding the contract, and the crazy auction tonight. Everything had a reason. He knew who I was. He knew everything. "Then what about the bidding the other day?" I asked hesitantly. Ethan smiled. "I simply didn't want the daughter of my father's friend to be intimidated by others. You deserved a better start at Sterling." For the first time in a long time, I felt a warmth spread through my heart. The feeling of being understood, of being protected in silence, was something I had never received from Daniel. "Thank you, Ethan," I whispered. "Thank you for everything." The spectacle at the charity ball dealt a severe blow to Daniel and Kira's pride, but that was just the beginning. The real storm broke a few days later, not in social events, but in the world of business, where Daniel had always boasted of his talent. Daniel's firm, Crestwood Construction, after being rescued by Sterling, had experienced a few years of decent growth, but its foundations were not solid. It relied mainly on relationships and minor contracts. Daniel didn't know that many of those partners were linked to or indebted to my family's Sterling Group, and now the test was over. The preferential treatment was over, too. One Monday morning, Daniel arrived at the office and received the first call. It was from his largest cement supplier. "Daniel, I'm sorry, but we have to suspend the next shipment to your company. We're in the middle of a surprise warehouse inspection. I'll let you know when we finish." Before he could understand, the phone rang again. This time it was a major client, the developer of an apartment complex his company was building. "Daniel, I just received orders from upstairs. We've decided to rescind the contract with your company. Please hand over the works this week." "But why? We haven't breached any clause." "It's a board decision. I'm just communicating it to you. Goodbye." The nightmare had just begun. Throughout the day, he received an avalanche of similar calls and emails. Suppliers refused to deliver materials. Partners demanded immediate debt payment. Clients abruptly canceled contracts. The finance director rushed into Daniel's office, his face pale. "Director, we're finished. The company's cash flow is in the red. If money doesn't come in this week, we won't be able to pay the workers or the subcontractors." Daniel slumped into his chair, his mind blank. He couldn't understand why everything had gone wrong so suddenly. Everything was fine until now. He racked his brain, called everyone to find out the cause, but only got evasive and negative answers. The downfall of an arrogant man usually begins when he has to lower himself to beg the person he has despised the most. And that day came for Daniel. After days of seeking help in vain, he did something he never would have imagined. He came to find me at Sterling Tower. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked on the door with an uncomfortable expression. "Madam Vice President, Mr. Daniel Castaneda, Director of Crestwood Construction, wishes to see you. He says it's very urgent." The room fell silent, with some curious glances directed toward me. I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. "Have him wait in visit room number 2. I'll be there in 5 minutes." When I entered, Daniel was sitting on the sofa with a look of anxiety and exhaustion. He looked much more haggard. Seeing me, he jumped up, forcing a supplicating smile. "Ariana, no, Vice President. I hope I'm not disturbing you." His hesitation when changing his address sounded ridiculous. "Is there a problem, Mr. Director? I don't have much time." I sat in the chair across from him, maintaining a safe distance. My tone was purely professional. Daniel seemed taken aback by my coldness. He stammered, "Ariana, my company is going through some difficulties. Partners are suddenly giving me a hard time. I know you hold a high position at Sterling. You have many connections. Could you put in a good word for me?" So that was it, eh? He still thought I was just a lucky high-level employee and was coming to ask me for a favor. The irony made me want to laugh. I looked him straight in the eye. My voice was devoid of emotion. "Mr. Castaneda, what are you talking about? Sterling is a large group. We work according to procedures and principles. All business decisions are based on capability and reputation, not personal relationships." Daniel paled at my flat refusal. He moved closer. His voice became a plea. "Ariana, I beg you. After all, we were husband and wife. Help me one last time. You just need to say one word and they will respect you. This company is my life's work. It can't sink." His life's work. I smiled with disdain. "The work of your life built on my father's $30 million and your brazen betrayal. Daniel, do you still think I'm the fool I used to be?" Daniel froze. He hadn't expected me to know that. What are you saying?" "You know better than anyone what I'm saying." I stood up, not wanting to waste another second. "If there is nothing else, I ask you to leave. I have work to do." Having said this, I turned and left the room, leaving Daniel petrified, his face alternating between red and white, shame and humiliation raw on his skin. After the ironic encounter with Daniel, I quickly erased him from my mind to concentrate on work. But Ethan was not so easy to forget. A few days later, he contacted me, not to talk about personal matters, but with a surprising collaboration proposal, a luxury eco-resort in the Catskill Mountains. I looked at the project draft Ethan had sent me, surprised. But Sterling has never been strong in this sector. This is Centurion Group's playing field. Ethan, seated across from me in the meeting room, smiled. That's precisely why I need you. Centurion is strong in construction and operations, but Sterling has unparalleled land banking and financial capacity. If we collaborate, this will be a massive success project. His idea was bold and full of potential. Rationally, I knew it was a good opportunity for the group, but emotionally, working with this unpredictable man made me hesitate. As if he read my thoughts, Ethan added, Don't worry, I'm very professional. I won't mix personal with professional. Finally, after presenting it and getting my father's approval, I accepted Ethan's proposal. The joint project officially launched, and from then on, Ethan and I spent more and more time working together. We had meetings that stretched late into the night, work trips to the mountains to inspect the terrain. Working with Ethan, I realized he was a completely different person than I had thought. He was intelligent, determined, and had an amazing strategic vision. But behind his cold and serious appearance was a very fun and warm person. He often told jokes to lighten the mood in meetings or noticed my fatigue and prepared me a cup of coffee. Once, during an inspection on a hillside in the Catskills, it suddenly started raining. We had to take shelter in a small wooden cafe by the side of the road. The rain poured down and the air was cold. Ethan ordered 2 piping hot mochas. We sat by the window watching the curtain of rain. You look very different from how you were in college, Ethan said suddenly. I smiled. Very different, older and uglier. He shook his head. His gaze was deep. More determined, stronger, and you no longer have to hide. I like the Ariana of now better. His words made my heart race. My cheeks flushed. I quickly looked away toward the window to hide my embarrassment. The atmosphere between us suddenly became very different. It was no longer the shyness of coworkers, but the subtle vibration of 2 people who had found a connection. That night when he drove me home, he didn't say anything more. He simply opened the car door in silence. Before I went inside, he said, Ariana, the past is over. Give yourself the chance to start over, and if possible, give me the chance to be by your side. While I found a new ray of light in my life, Kira's world sank into darkness. The truth about my identity she had discovered was like a bomb in the life she was trying to build. That night, Daniel arrived at the apartment drunk. As soon as he opened the door, he found Kira sitting in the middle of the living room with an expressionless face and the baby crying next to her. Drunk again? Do you still consider this your home? Kira snapped. Daniel, annoyed, replied, Why are you complaining so much? I work to earn money so you and the child can live well. What more do you want? Earn money? Kira let out a bitter laugh. What else can you earn? Your company is about to go bankrupt, and even your director title is about to disappear. She stood up and threw the folder of documents onto the table in front of Daniel. Look at this. Look who your ex-wife is. Daniel frowned and grabbed the papers. When he saw the Sterling Group organizational chart, my photo, and my title of executive vice president, his face completely changed. The glass he was holding fell to the floor, shattering. The alcohol in his body seemed to evaporate. Where did you get this? Where I got it doesn't matter, Kira shouted, tears in her eyes. What matters is that you deceived me, you idiot. You are a complete idiot. You left a gold mine, a swan, to pick up garbage like me. Do you know who her father is? He's Leonard Mitchell, the chairman of the Sterling Group. Do you know what you've lost? Daniel collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. He knew. Now he knew everything. He understood why his company had gone belly up so quickly. He understood why Ethan had paid $5 million for a painting. He understood why I had left so calmly. It wasn't because I was strong, but because in my eyes, he and his small fortune were nothing. Terror seized Daniel. Not only had he lost a wife, he had offended an entire empire. Why? Why did she never tell me? He muttered, as if he had lost his mind. Kira scoffed. Why? So a family of opportunists like yours would rush to exploit her? Do you think everyone is as stupid as you are? It's over, Daniel. It's truly over. You destroyed everything yourself. The relationship they had built on lies and materialism completely crumbled. There was no longer love, only reproaches, blame, and an infinite fear of the grim future that awaited them. After the terrible argument with Daniel, Kira locked herself in her room for an entire day. She didn't eat or drink. She just sat hugging her baby, her mind in a whirlwind. The life she had dreamed of, the position of the wife of a major company director, the luxuries, everything was fading. Daniel was no longer valuable. Relying on him now was like hugging a rock to sink together. Kira wasn't foolish. She knew that in this situation, staying with Daniel was a dead end. She had to find her own way out. But how? Go back empty-handed and start from scratch. She wasn't willing. She had invested too much to get here. And then, in her despair, a bold idea surfaced in her mind. The only person who could save her and her son was, ironically, the person she had wronged. Ariana Mitchell. Kira knew I was a person with a good upbringing from a good family, and that I probably wouldn't act ruthlessly. If she appeared regretful and vulnerable, perhaps she would awaken my compassion, especially with an innocent child as a shield. A plan began to form in her head. A perfect play with her as the protagonist, the young, helpless mother, and her baby as a supporting actor. She wouldn't tell Daniel anything. He was useless now. He might even ruin everything. She would act on her own. Kira began to prepare for her role. She chose old, simple clothes. She deliberately didn't wear makeup to show her dark circles and her tired, haggard appearance. She looked in the mirror, satisfied with the pathetic look she had created. Then she called my assistant's number, a name and number she had memorized long ago. "Hello, is this Vice President Ariana Mitchell's office?" Her voice trembled, sounding miserable. "I'm Kira. I have something very important to tell her. I would like to meet with her once. Please, please help me." When my assistant informed me, I was surprised, but quickly understood that the fox had begun to move. I didn't refuse. "Give her an appointment. Tomorrow afternoon at the lobby cafe. I want to see what kind of play the brazen homewrecker is going to stage for me." I arrived at the cafe at the agreed time. Kira was already waiting for me in a secluded corner. She looked exactly as I had imagined, a pitiful appearance, carefully orchestrated. Seeing me, she quickly stood up, bowed her head, her hands nervously wringing. "Hello, hello, Ariana." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and sat across from her, crossing my arms. "You have 15 minutes. Speak." My coldness and directness unsettled her a bit. She seemed to have prepared a long preamble, but I cut it short. She took a deep breath and the performance began. 2 rows of tears suddenly fell down her pale face. "Ariana, I know I was wrong. I was truly wrong," she sobbed. "At that time, I was young and naive, and Daniel's sweet words blinded me. I didn't know he was married. When I found out it was already too late, I was pregnant. I truly didn't want to destroy your family." I sat still, taking a sip of tea without showing any emotion. I had seen this scene too many times in movies. Seeing that I wasn't reacting, Kira intensified her attack. She knelt on the floor, trying to crawl and grab my leg. "I beg you, I plead with you, forgive my son and me. You can hit me this time, you can insult me, whatever you want, but please don't corner Daniel any further. If he sinks, how are my son and I going to survive?" She started using the child as a shield. "The baby is innocent, Ariana. He needs his father. You are a woman too. You'll be a mother someday. You understand, right? Please, I beg you, have mercy and give the father of my child a chance. I promise I will take my son far away and we will never cross your path again," she cried inconsolably. Her words sounded so pitiful, so tragic. Perhaps someone else would have sympathized, but not me. I only felt deep disgust. I stood up and stepped back to avoid her dirty hand. I looked at the woman kneeling at my feet. My voice was cold as ice. "Your performance is over." Kira froze. She looked at me with eyes still full of tears. She didn't understand why tears, her most powerful weapon, had no effect on me. I continued, my voice full of sarcasm. "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child who will swallow your crocodile tears? You didn't know he was married? Do you think I don't have the provocative messages you sent me? The baby is innocent. Yes, he is innocent. But a mother who uses her own child as a shield for her selfishness is not innocent at all." I leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Tell Daniel that you started this game, but how it ends is decided by me." The annual general shareholders meeting of Crestwood Construction was held at a luxury hotel, a final attempt by Daniel to pretend a false stability. He went up to the podium dressed in an expensive suit, trying to present development plans and future potential, while the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. I wasn't there. Instead, I was sitting with my father in his office, watching everything live on a large screen. Daniel lied fluently, promising imaginary profits, trying to calm the worried shareholders. He didn't know that among the small shareholders sitting below was a representative of a force that could crush him at any moment. When the financial presentation ended, the atmosphere became tense. Shareholders began to question the company's losses. Daniel defended himself clumsily when suddenly the main door of the room burst open. Two bodyguards in black suits entered, followed by a man of distinguished and authoritative demeanor. The room fell silent. Daniel looked up and his face went white as paper. The person who had just entered was none other than my father, Leonard Mitchell, chairman of the Sterling Group. My father entered without even looking at Daniel. He walked straight to the front row, reserved for the largest shareholders, and sat down next to the group's lawyer. His appearance was like a time bomb. Daniel on the podium trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. He couldn't understand why his former father-in-law was there. The presenter, after a moment of confusion, recognized my father. He rushed to say into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to welcome Chairman Leonard Mitchell, representative of our company's largest shareholder." The largest shareholder? Daniel was stunned. He had always thought his largest shareholder was a foreign investment fund hidden behind several layers. Now he understood. The whole thing had been a farce. The invisible hand that had been strangling his company all this time was now revealed, and it was the hand of the family he had abandoned and insulted mercilessly. Daniel's day of reckoning had arrived. Before the meeting officially resumed after my father's appearance, there was a brief break. Daniel descended from the podium, his mind blank, trying to digest the shock. He needed to regain his composure to show that he wasn't afraid. At that moment, he saw me entering from the outer lobby. I had come to meet my father and witness the final act. Seeing me, the cheap pride of a failed man took hold of Daniel. He needed to do something to show he was still in control, to humiliate me one last time before everything came crashing down. He turned to Kira, who was also present as marketing director. Her face already lacked a drop of blood from fear. Daniel pulled Kira toward him, circling her waist possessively. He said loudly, enough for me and a few others to hear, "See, honey, there are people who, no matter how hard they try, will never belong in this world." Then he looked directly at me with a scornful smile. "Leaving you was the best decision. She truly deserves me." Kira in Daniel's arms was rigid. She knew Daniel was committing a monumental stupidity, but she didn't dare to oppose him. Daniel's words resonated, but they no longer hurt me. I only felt pity for someone who, until the very last moment, didn't realize his mistake, clinging to a shred of illusory dignity. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him in silence, with the calmness of someone watching a silent play. His smile, his arrogance, everything was ridiculous. He didn't know that those words were not a stab at me, but the final shovelful of dirt onto his own grave. He was performing the final monologue of a clown just before the curtain of his life fell forever. Right after Daniel's arrogant statement, my father stood up from the front row and approached. His calmness and imposing demeanor made Daniel and those around him hold their breath. Kira, seeing my father, turned even paler. She knew she couldn't remain silent. She quickly broke free from Daniel's arms and bowed her head in a gesture of flattery and fear. "Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kira, the company's marketing director. She stammered, then looked up, forcing an empty smile. "Chairman, what are you doing here?" Kira's naive and desperate question echoed in the silence. My father didn't look at her. He walked past her with an icy gaze and stopped in front of Daniel. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a protective and affirming gesture. Then he looked directly at Daniel and Kira. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for everyone to hear. "I am here, first of all, as the largest shareholder of Crestwood Construction." He paused and then added with sarcasm, "And second, I have come to see what kind of clown show my ex-son-in-law plans to put on with the $30 million he has left of my money." A deathly silence fell over the hall. Ex-son-in-law, $30 million. Everyone looked at each other and then at Daniel and Kira with disbelief. Daniel was petrified, without a drop of blood in his face. Kira staggered, almost fainting. My father didn't give them time to react. He turned around, went up to the podium, and took the microphone. "Excuse the interruption, but I believe the shareholders present here have the right to know the truth." And then he began to tell. He recounted the entire story of the 3-year test, the $30 million investment to save Daniel's company from bankruptcy. He presented all the evidence, transfer contracts, signed agreements. He unmasked Daniel, an incompetent man propped up by his in-laws' money, a traitor who abandoned his daughter as soon as he thought he could fly solo. The room erupted. Shouts, insults, murmurs. The shareholders who had placed their trust and money in Daniel now looked at him with hatred. Daniel and Kira were at the center of the storm, surrounded by hundreds of scornful gazes. Their farce had come to an end in the most humiliating way possible. The meeting descended into chaos. Investors shouted, demanding that Daniel return their money. Daniel remained motionless on the stage like a statue. He was completely shattered. Kira had fainted and was being attended to by medical staff. Amidst the chaos, my father and I quietly left. Everything was decided. A few days later, when the shock had still not passed, Daniel came to my house gate. He no longer had his former arrogance, but a haggard and pathetic appearance. He stood outside, not daring to ring the doorbell, just looking. I was having tea in the garden when I saw him. Shortly after, Eleanor and Vanessa arrived. Seeing me, the three of them ran and knelt in front of me, just outside the gate. Eleanor cried inconsolably, "Ariana, daughter, I beg you, I was wrong. Forgive Daniel this time, please. If something happens to him, what will become of me?" Daniel also looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Ariana, I know I was wrong. I'm a bastard. Will you give me a chance? We can start over." I looked at the three people kneeling in front of me, staging a farce of repentance. My heart felt nothing. I was tired of their tears and their lies. I stood up, walked to the gate, and looked at them through the cold iron bars. "A chance?" I smiled with disdain. "When you slapped me, when you threw money in my face, when you and your family planned to seize my assets, did you give me a chance? When your mistress sent me provocative messages, when your mother came to my company to cause a scandal, did you think of the word chance?" They fell silent, unable to say anything. I looked at them one last time with a cold, resolute gaze. "Get up and leave. Don't dirty the ground of my house any further." Then I added, my voice calm, but every word was like a knife. "Look for work elsewhere. After divorcing me, this city is no longer worthy of you, is it?" Having said that, I turned and went back inside without looking back. Behind me, I could still hear their cries and pleas, but none of that mattered anymore. At that very moment, my father's assistant called. "Madam Vice President, the Sterling Group has just issued a press release. We will initiate legal proceedings to liquidate all of Crestwood Construction's assets and recover the investment. It's all over." The storm my father and I unleashed did not stop in that boardroom. It swept through and destroyed everything Daniel's family had built on lies. The Sterling Group acted swiftly and forcefully. Within a week, all of Crestwood Construction's assets were seized for liquidation and debt collection. Daniel went from being an elegant director to an unemployed man burdened with debt. The scandal stripped him of his reputation. No company dared to hire someone with a background of fraud and betrayal. The luxurious apartment he had bought for Kira was also seized by the bank. And Kira, the mistress who once boasted of her victory, quickly demonstrated her self-interested nature. As soon as she learned that Daniel had lost everything, she disappeared without saying goodbye, taking the child with her. They say she left a note with a few badly written lines. "Take care of yourself. I can't let my son suffer with a failure." Daniel lost everything, his career, his money, the woman and child he had risked everything for. His family did not escape their tragic fate either. The house they lived in was also mortgaged and soon foreclosed. Eleanor and Vanessa, two women who had lived in luxury and were accustomed to looking down on others, now had to move into a narrow, damp rental room in the outskirts. The entire family had fallen from the peak of their false glory to the bottom of society. I heard this news through my assistant, feeling no satisfaction, only emptiness. Perhaps karma existed. They used the dirtiest tactics to try to take everything from me, and now they were the ones who had lost everything. The wheel of destiny was fair, but also relentless. I no longer worried about them. This past was dead and buried to me. After the storm, my life gradually returned to normal. The work at Sterling and the joint project with Centurion kept me busy, leaving no time to think about unpleasant things. My relationship with Ethan grew closer every day. He was not only an excellent partner, but also a confidant, someone who was always there to listen to me and give me sincere advice. One weekend night after going to a concert together, Ethan drove me home. Instead of going straight in as usual, he parked on a quiet nearby street under a row of trees shedding their leaves. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said. His voice was suddenly more serious. I turned to look at him, my heart beating a little faster. Under the dim light of the streetlights, his face looked incredibly gentle. He took my hand. It was warm and firm. "Ariana, I know you've been through a very difficult time. I know it might not be the right moment, but I don't want to wait a minute longer." He looked deeply into my eyes, his gaze full of sincerity. "I like you. I've loved you for a long time, since the day I saw you alone in the library and said that foolish thing about your eyes not being able to lie." He smiled slightly. "During all these years, I followed you from afar, seeing you happy, sad, and suffering in that marriage. I was very angry, but I had no right to intervene. Now all that has passed. You are free. I don't promise you a life without storms, but I promise that I will always be the one to share the umbrella with you. I don't promise to make you laugh every day, but I promise I will always be there to dry your tears. Ariana, can you give me the opportunity to officially be by your side and take care of you?" His declaration had no flowers, no candles, no flowery words. It was simple, direct, and so sincere that it melted my heart. Tears began to fall, but this time they were tears of happiness. I had waited for a sincerity like this for a long time. I didn't say anything, I just nodded slightly. Ethan smiled, gently dried a tear from my cheek, and kissed me. A kiss that not only had the sweet taste of love, but also the salty taste of rebirth. Time passed quickly. A year had elapsed since the storm. My life was now full of color. The Midtown redevelopment project was in its final phase and received countless accolades. I had proven my worth. No one at Sterling dared to underestimate me. My relationship with Ethan strengthened every day. We were true partners, sharing joys and sorrows in work and in life. One rainy afternoon, I was in the car on my way home when I stopped at a red light. I looked out the window and suddenly saw a familiar figure under the awning of a convenience store. A man in a delivery company uniform, thin and weather-beaten, was trying to fix an old motorcycle. It was Daniel. He looked 10 years older, with gray hairs and a haggard face, with no trace of the director he once was. At that moment, he also looked up and saw me. Our eyes met through the rain. Daniel froze and quickly lowered his head, perhaps out of shame. I don't know what compelled me, but I asked the driver to stop. I rolled down the window. Daniel, seeing me, hesitated for a moment and then approached without daring to look up. Hello, Ariana," he mumbled. "Are you doing okay?" I asked, a simple formality. Daniel smiled sadly. "Surviving." He stayed silent for a long time and then suddenly looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "Ariana, I'm sorry. I know it's too late to say it, but I'm truly sorry for everything. I was foolish. Blind." I raised my hand to signal him not to continue. Seeing his pathetic state, all the hatred I felt for him seemed to vanish. "The past is past, Daniel. I no longer hold a grudge against you," I said calmly. "We all pay for our mistakes. You have, and I did too at the time. Live the rest of your life well." Having said that, I motioned to the driver. The car slowly started. In the rearview mirror, I could still see Daniel standing in the rain with his head bowed. The last tear for that marriage fell. Not for him, but for the person I used to be. From today on, I was truly free. And 2 years later, Ethan and I were on top of the central tower of the Midtown redevelopment complex, my first major project and the testament to our successful collaboration. From here, you could see a part of the city growing powerfully. The sun was rising, painting the sky pink. A beautiful dawn. Ethan stood behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "See? What we've built together is incredible." I smiled, resting my head against his chest. "Yes, but the most incredible thing is having you here to see it with me." My life was now complete. I had found a man who truly loved and valued me. My parents adored Ethan, completely relieved to trust their daughter to him. We were in no rush to get married. For us, a piece of paper wasn't as important as the understanding and mutual support we shared every day. Sometimes I still heard news of Daniel's family. They say they had to sell the last house the grandparents owned in the country to pay off debts. They were living a very hard life. It didn't matter to me anymore, and everyone has their own path, and they had chosen theirs full of thorns. With part of my wealth, I created a small charitable foundation to offer legal and psychological support to women having difficulties in their marriages. I wanted to use my own story to give them strength, to let them know that after the rain, the sun always comes out. Ethan gently tightened his embrace. "What are you thinking, my love?" I turned to look into his warm eyes. "I'm thinking about how wonderful life is. It took something from me, but it gave me something much better in return." He smiled and kissed me on the lips. "Then from now on, let me create many more wonders with you, my love." I laughed happily. The past was closed. A new chapter of my life, a new and brilliant dawn, was opening before me.